Hello, welcome to my video on my trip across country. As you can see, I've got a FJR1300. It's a 2005 bike. I bought it in January 2023. That's a trip home in the snow. It's a good bike. The previous owner looked after it really well, so there wasn't a huge amount of maintenance to do. Just put some new tyres on it, and I also instrumented up the crankcase and the final drive to keep an eye on the temperatures on the trip. So just did a couple of test runs up and down Michigan, to and from work, that kind of thing. Had some help in the garage, as you can see. Yeah, and I got into test rides and bits and pieces like that. So the first test ride here was again in the snow. And then I was into my first day in about 6 months later. The first day was Detroit to Roscommon. It was done after work, so it was a nice short 200-mile day to an area where we camp. So I stayed in the camper that night, which was a nice stop. It was like stress-free. I knew where I was going to stay. Everything was planned out. It was pretty good. It was a nice first day to sort of ease me in, sort of 200 miles, nice and easy, and then pretty much straight into the second day. The second day is the longest day that I did, and it was 780 miles, and that was from Roscommon to Fergus Falls in Minnesota, and that took me quite a few hours, but it gave me a lot of time to get acquainted with the bike. As you can see, I went over Mackinac Bridge, which was pretty cool, and I also got stopped for speeding in the UP, which wasn't great, but luckily the police officer let me off with a warning, and I carried on. But it was a lot of learning the bike, how comfortable the bike was, how best to ride the bike, how often I was going to need to get off, and stuff like that. It was pretty evident early on that the windshield was a problem. The wind shear off the top of the windshield was creating an enormous amount of wind noise through the vents on the helmet, and just the volume of the wind noise was incredible. So I ended up wearing earplugs for pretty much the first half of the trip. There we go, that's Fergus Falls. There we go, day 3. Fergus Falls to Billings, Montana, through North Dakota, which if anyone's been through North Dakota, they'll know that it is flat and it is straight and it is pretty boring. So it was more just getting used to the bike, feeling out what the fuel economy was going to be like over a long run, figuring out best way to sort out the luggage on the bike and that kind of thing. I also took a drone with me as well, so I ended up stopping and taking some drone footage, which was pretty cool in certain places along the way, without trying to make too much of a nuisance out of myself. So I was kind of tucked out the way here, just taking some drone footage of, I think I was in Montana at this point, but the scenery was starting to get more mountainous the further through Montana you get towards Billings, and then ended up staying at Billings, a nice Airbnb, and then into day 4, which was Billings, Montana to McCall in Idaho, and that brings you along a nice bit of road which is called Lolo Pass. So you go from Billings to Lolo, and then Lolo Pass, which takes you from Montana all the way through to Idaho, and it actually crosses over the Continental Divide, and this has to be one of the most underrated roads I've ever ridden. The mountains, the trees, the river, everything involved was just spectacular. Very, very pretty ride. And I completely lucked out with the weather as well, so I've been told that the weather can get pretty choppy up there. Like the drop of a hat, you can have more rain than what you can deal with, and you'll get into some issues, especially on a bike. But like I say, I was supremely lucky. Into day 5 already. Day 5 is McCall to Sacramento. This was an interesting day. because start off in McCall in Idaho with the mountains and the trees and the rivers and everything else. And then you head south towards, we actually went through Oregon for a short stint and then into Nevada, and that's where this next video is. It kind of brings to the forefront the change in topography that you can get in a very short period of time. So this trip from McCall to Sacramento, I went from the mountains in Idaho all the way through the desert in Nevada and then through to California. And you can it gives you a good visual of it there, where it goes from mountains to just dead flat and hot and sunny and sandy, which was really cool. But hey, there's a desert. That's pretty much what I was riding through, and then down into Sacramento, and then into day 6. Day 6 was kind of it wasn't a particularly pretty ride south through California, but I was learning about some weather that I was going to have to ride through after my stop in California, so I decided to leave the bike with a friend of mine in Fallbrook and fly home. So the route that I had planned was through Arizona, and it was due to be well above 110, so I decided to leave the bike there and fly back to Detroit, which I did, to come back and get the bike a year later. So luckily my friend offered to look after the bike. We did some modifications to the windscreen. As you can see, it looks pretty cool, fairly cut down. Then we took it on a little test ride through Southern California. So we went for a 290 mile test ride through Southern California, hitting all the really scenic places. My buddy's lived down there since the mid-70s, so he's an English guy as well, so he knew all the cool places to go and see. You can't describe it as a scrapyard, but it was kind of a historic car museum, we'll call it that for now. That was really cool, so there's loads of really old cool stuff in there. Sunrise Highway, Yacumba, the gateway to the desert as well, which was really cool. Ever so windy there, but that was awesome. Josie's Hideout, that's a cool place. If you ever get a chance to see it, that's actually Sunrise Highway as well, so that looks out over the Anza Borrego Desert. So then into day 7, so this was effectively my first day riding on the way back. This was through Arizona, up into Flagstaff, and up towards Jerome, so you go along Route 10. Before you get to Phoenix, you do a left and you head towards Jerome and Cottonwood. It's such a spectacular drive. The Prescott, of course, and the drone comes out again, trying not to make a nuisance out of myself. So I stopped at the side of the road to get some drone footage. Actually, some dude stopped and made sure I was alright, which was pretty cool. So there's always a lot of bikers there, and so if you do get into issues or have to stop, you will find that someone will stop and just make sure you're okay, and it's nice to do the same in return to anyone that you see stopped. But that was pretty cool. But going into Jerome, or was it into Prescott, one or the other, this bit of video here, I encountered the first problem with the bike, which was complete rear brake failure. So I completely cooked the rear brakes going down some of the mountain passes, so I ended up having to stop in Jerome and have a look, and then quick stop in Cottonwood as well for a few minutes, and then carry on all the way to Flagstaff. And then after Flagstaff, this was day 8, on the way up to Uri, Colorado, stopped at Lava Flows, which is just north of Flagstaff, on the way up to the Grand Canyon. So that was incredible scenery, and this particular road is on the way to the Native American ruins, which I stopped at as well. If you ever get a chance to go and see them, it's well worth stopping in. Just an incredible scenery to see, an incredible structure to go and have a look around. It's really worthwhile going and having a look. And the road is beautiful. Desert riding, I love desert riding. I like the heat, I like the environment, the scenery. And then up to Grand Canyon, I must admit I stayed for a grand total of 10 minutes at the Grand Canyon. There was far too many people there, far too peoply. So turned around, turned up, took a picture, turned around, left, and carried on my way up to Four Corners. So Four Corners is a silly little thing. It's a bit of concrete in the middle of the desert, which basically joins 4 states together, where they all meet, and you can go and take a picture of it. It's pretty cool. You can't ride past it without stopping and having a look. It's worth it. And that brings me on to what I feel is the highlight of the trip, the $1 Million Highway in Colorado. As you can see by the graphic on the left hand side, it's a road between Durango all the way up to Ori in Colorado. It takes a good couple of hours to ride it, and there are spectacular views, incredible elevations. It's just a really nice road to ride. It's, as you can see, there's no guardrails on the vast majority of it, so you do have to pay attention. There's sections of it where you can look over the edge and it can be a 1,000-foot drop, but the views that come with it are breathtaking, and it just continues on for miles and miles and miles. And I believe it's called the $1 Million Highway because when the road was made, it costs $1 million for every mile of road that they put in, which was an interesting little fact that I learnt. I believe it's a fact. I'd like to think so. And then I stayed in Ori overnight, which is a tiny little town tucked away in the mountains. It's beautiful there, it really is very nice. They've got some hot springs there if you want to stay and have a dip in the hot springs. I didn't have time to do any of that because I was riding through. But if I was to go back again, I'd definitely make a point of staying in the hot springs, or staying nearby the hot springs so that I could visit them more and enjoy them a little bit more. But these are all things that you learn as you're riding through. So day 9, Ori in Colorado to Limon, or Limon, however they pronounce it, in Colorado. This was kind of the sunset to the trip, if you like. At this point, I kind of knew that the trip was coming to an end, or at least the views and things that I like to see when I go on rides was coming to an end. Because once you get out of the Rockies, on the way back to Detroit, there's not really a lot to see. So this was a nice point for me to kind of make the most of the views that I had left to see. And as you can see here, I'll stop and get some fuel, turn around, take a picture of the Rockies that I'd just ridden through, which was really cool to do. And then you're on Route 70. So Route 70 takes you all the way through Colorado and up and over the Continental Divide, which I had passed over the Continental Divide on Lolo Pass. So each time you cross over the Continental Divide, there's a sign that says Continental Divide. And it's a pretty cool thing because if you're not aware, then the Continental Divide is effectively the highest point, or the ridge line that goes north-south down through the Rockies, and any water that's on the east of it ends up in the Mississippi River, and any water that's on the west of it ends up in the Pacific Ocean. So you get a sense of, once you go past that sign, you kind of know you're going downhill, and it's kind of like the downhill run into Denver. And so stop and take a few pictures. Again, the pictures don't do any of this any justice. It was by far and away more beautiful than the pictures are going to describe. I've been very lucky with the weather up until this point. As you can see, I pulled off the road and there's some specks of water on the camera. The camera doesn't really pick it up very well, but it was quite an intense downpour. You can kind of see it on the road a little bit, so I figured it was best to put the waterproofs on and get sort of geared up for what I thought I was in for, which turned out to be a pretty good plan, because as I got back on the highway, I learnt fairly quickly that there had been an enormous amount of rain just further up the road, and if you can see on the video, you notice how wet the road is, and there was a strange foamy stuff on the road as well, which I couldn't really sort of describe. But I kept the bike upright, which was the main thing, and carried on through the tunnels, and keep going along Route 70, and eventually you end up in Denver, which is always a nightmare. Every time I've ridden through Denver, it's been traffic and not particularly very nice, but I'm sure it's got its nice spots. And the sun came out again, and I started to cook a little bit, so time to take the waterproofs off and carry on. Then onwards from Limon. Lots of bugs, so many bugs. I don't know what it was about that particular point in time, but trying to keep the bugs off the visor was a constant challenge. And then into day 11, it was Gardner through to Effingham. I actually stopped at St. Louis to get a picture of the Gateway Arch, which was pretty cool. And then it was pretty much into day 12, which was the final day. So Effingham to Detroit. So there's not a huge amount scenery-wise to see in this portion of the trip. Just kind of sit it at 70, 75 miles an hour and just keep the miles going underneath you and just keep the bike going all the way home. So that was about it. That was a full 12-day trip over what was effectively a year, so two separate sort of things. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you like it, smash the crap out of that like button. And if you want to check out some other videos, I've got a couple of 1,000-mile trips, ride 1Ks in a day. So I've got one that goes around Lake Michigan on the Harley, and then I've got another one which was in the UK, where I started off in Northamptonshire and go all the way up to Scotland to a whiskey distillery, turn around and then come all the way back again, and some other bits and pieces. So have a look around. Yeah, thank you again for watching. Cheers.